in general, and those wanting to work with us during the early test phase of the program in particular, which some of you may also refer to as sort of the alpha phase, the test phase. So before we go any further, I just wanted to notify you all that we are recording this session today. Okay, so could we go to the next slide, please, Caroline? So what we will do today is we'll give you a bit of background to the program, an overview of the architecture and the dashboard interactions, some key aspects for you to be aware of, and what our expectations are. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat field as we go along. We will try and answer all your questions, and any that we are unable to, we will respond in writing via our dashboard providers hub. And before I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, I'd just like to say that we will be observing a 1 minute silence for Sir David at 2:30, and Caroline will prompt us for that. So I have a few colleagues who have joined me today, so let me start by introducing them to you. Caroline, would you like to go first, please?
Hello, I'm Caroline. I'm Communications and Engagement Manager for the programme.
Thank you, Caroline. James?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Reardon, the Head of Technology Development for the programme.
And Helen?
Hi, I'm Helen Scrimmager. I'm the Product Owner for the Central Digital Architecture.
Thank you all. And I just sort of remembered I haven't introduced myself. My name is Raman Thaliwal, and I am Head of Product for the Pensions Dashboard Programme. Caroline, can we go to the next slide, please? So the vision. Our vision is to enable individuals to access their pensions information online securely and all in one place, thereby supporting better planning for retirement and growing financial well-being. How are we going to do this? We will do this by delivering the technical architecture that is necessary for the dashboard service to operate, making sure that the architecture is secure, efficient, and effective, and is based on technology that is flexible, it's scalable, and it is extensible. Our goals for the Pensions Dashboard Programme. So just wanted to quickly go through what our goals are for the programme. We know that people find pensions very confusing, and most people do not connect with their pensions until much later in their career. And there can be several reasons for them for that. One, they're confusing, and they're quite difficult to sort of, the information is quite difficult to understand. So the goals of the Pensions Dashboard service are to connect people with their pensions, presenting the information clearly and in plain English, enabling people to understand what they are seeing, and signposting them to impartial guidance and/or regulated advice. The aim is to increase people's confidence, empowering them to make more informed choices about their pensions, ultimately contributing to people's financial well-being in retirement. Could we go to the next slide, please, Caroline? So just to give you a brief history to the background of where we are right now. In 2016, following the announcement in the budget by government The industry-led project managed by Association of British Insurers set out to create a prototype dashboard to demonstrate that a user sitting at a dashboard potentially could be connected to a range of pension savings that they may have with different pensions providers or schemes. In 2017, the prototype project published its findings. And in 2018, the government launched a consultation. It started a feasibility study and launched a consultation to understand the best way to deliver this architecture and the pensions dashboard service, and to establish some basic principles. In 2019, the Money and Pension Service was asked to take this work forward, and they began by setting up the Pensions Dashboard Programme to develop the central digital architecture to enable the operations of the dashboards. In 2020, the team undertook industry consultation that led to the first issue of the data standards, and we also prepared for the technical requirements to start the procurement of an organization who would then build the central architecture for us. In 2021, Capgemini and Origo were appointed to develop this central architecture. The Pensions Dashboard Programme also defined what we would be doing during our alpha and beta phases, and we started our engagement with data providers and dashboard providers. So this is part of that progression of work. I will now we'll share a video which will, from a user perspective, demonstrate what it will feel like for the user to be using the pensions dashboard. It is a video that some of you may already have seen, but here it is to give a quick refresher on how it will feel for a user. Caroline, over to you.
With more than 2/3 of people holding multiple pensions, it can be tricky to get a clear and complete picture of your pensions. We set up the Pensions Dashboards Programme, or PDP, to tackle this challenge. Dashboards will be the place where you can view information about your pensions in a clear and simple format. But it takes a lot to make that happen. You begin your journey by navigating to a dashboard. Then you submit a request to find your pensions information, which is where things get a bit more involved. First, to keep your data safe, an identity service confirms that you are who you claim to be. You will be asked to give consent for your information to be used to perform the search on your pensions and to authorize providers and schemes to send your pensions information to the dashboard for you to view. You can withdraw your consent at any time. Now the Pension Finder service takes over. Importantly, it is not a database. More like a switchboard, it never holds any personal or pensions data. The Pension Finder service sends your request to all pension providers and schemes, which return a unique identifier to the dashboard for each matching pension. Then, you can request the pensions information, which the providers and schemes will send directly to the dashboard, where only you can access it. Pensions data will need to conform to a new standard. We are developing this standard with feedback from users as well as government and industry stakeholders to ensure it works for everyone involved. To keep your data safe, the Governance Register will ensure the Pensions Dashboards ecosystem meets the required security and performance standards. And dashboards will enable you to view your pensions information online, securely, and all in one place, so you can get a clear picture of your pensions.
Thank you, Caroline. I'll pass you on now to James to take us through or give us an overview of the architecture, the central architecture. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Rowan. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So I'm going to briefly take you through the spaghetti diagram on the left-hand side. I will take you through the user journeys at a high level, and then my colleague Helen Scrimminger will detail some of the APIs that are involved in those interactions. So there are two main processes through the dashboard. The first one is the find process. So this is where a user accesses a dashboard. They may be a new user to dashboards in general. They may be a new user to that specific dashboard, or they may be a returning user who's looking for more pensions. But in any event, they will opt to find their pensions, and they will be redirected to the consent and authorization service, which is part of the core technical architecture. That core consent and authorization service will then validate whether the user has an existing ID token, so i.e. they are a returning user, or in the event that they are a new user, they will be redirected to the identity service to confirm their identity. That user will then go through the process at the identity service to confirm their identity, and then they will be given authentication with which to use on the consent and authorization service. With that information and any supplemental information that they provide, they can then send out a pension find request to all data providers or specific data providers to search for any pension assets that they may have. In the background, data providers will then search the records for any records that match that individual. And in the event that they do find a matching record, they will then return a pension identifier, which we have called a PEI, which will be logged against that pension asset. Those PEIs for that individual are then stored at the consent and authorization service to make available for dashboards to retrieve. So that's effectively what happens when a user goes through the find process. When a user then opts to view those pension assets, again, they would probably be a returning user in that instance. They would log on to their dashboard, and the dashboard would then take those PEIs, which are currently dereferenced, and would resolve those to a resource location at the data provider. So if you look at the diagram, you can see on the left-hand side an API running directly between dashboard and the provider. At that point, the provider would confirm that the consent is in place for the dashboard to view that data, and it does that via the API you can see running from the bottom up to the consent and authorization service. In the event that that consent is there, then the data provider can release that information to the dashboard where it's presented to the user. So those are the two main routes through the central technical architecture, and I'll pass over to my colleague Helen, who will take you through the detail of the APIs which are involved. Helen?
Thank you, James. So this slide looks a bit busy. I apologise for that. But what this is doing is showing the technical APIs that dashboards data providers will need to implement in order to access it. So the first being pull PEI. So go and get the identifier. Second one being a pull endpoint. So we have the notion of the PEI, which resolves to an endpoint at a data provider. And as a dashboard, you'll need to know effectively the address that you have to knock on the door for. There's the view API. So once you have the pension identification information, you'll need to initiate a call of the API that is with the relevant data provider for that PEI. And then this is all wrapped up in something in security that I'm using the UMA protocol. Apologies, My dog's crying in the background, so I apologise for that now. I won't go through the data providers APIs unless anyone wants me to, but we're developing these with the industry through our ecosystem technical working group, where we've brought SMEs together from a number of organisations, and anyone's allowed to join. There's no specific requirements. Just if you're interested in connecting to the ecosystem, we want all the voices that we can get. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? And if you do, you'll need to put them in the chat bar.
Helen, there aren't any questions, but do you want to tell people how they can join the group, the ETWG?
Yeah, if you go onto the website, either contact info@pensions PDP or events@pensions PDP. Either will get you through to us and we'll add you to the attendees.
Thank you for that. There are no questions, so we will proceed and then we will take any questions at the end. Can we have the next slide, please, Caroline? Thank you. So I just thought we would take you through the timeline for the next 6 months, which is sort of the critical aspect for the test phase of this program. So we are doing 2 webinars. The first one is taking place today. The second webinar will take place on the 21st of October. We will we will issue questionnaires to those who express an interest to work with us during the test phase, for us to sort of understand a little bit more about the organisation that you represent. So people who are expressing an interest will be sent a questionnaire as soon as we receive your expression of interest. I think the first set of questionnaires will either be sent out today or early morning tomorrow for those organisations who've already expressed an interest. So we expect the completed questionnaires to be returned to us by the 5th of November, after which we will do a small selection exercise for organisations that we select to work with us. We aim to announce the successful candidates who are going to be working with us during Alpha by mid-December. And at the same time, although we are going to be sort of in Alpha from December onwards, like the test phase from December, we are going to start planning on how we select dashboard providers for beta onwards. We'll cover that a little bit later when Helen takes us through some of the process. In January, February and March, what we will be doing is working very closely with the organizations that are selected. During this period, we will also be undertaking quite a substantial amount of user research, and the user research will be focusing on the front-end dashboard design and the end-to-end user journey as well. During this period, it's critical that the organizations that are selected will be expected to work really closely with us in sharing their research, in taking on board the findings of the research that we do, and looking at how we respond then to the user research by improving the design or amending the design, etc. So this will carry on till about March, April. James, you have put something in there. Do you want to come in and... okay, so that was in response to Anthony's question. Sorry, thank you. Okay, so we don't expect the technical onboarding to take place during this period. It is more about sort of working with us to understand the aspects and also working with us for you to understand what the technical architecture and the requirements will be. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. I think for the next slide, Ami, are we going back to Helen for the next set of slides? Yes. Helen, over to you for the next slide, please.
Hi, thank you, Raman. So in order to, dashboards will be in a regulated activity, although it's a new regulated activity by the FCA. So anyone who wishes to become a dashboard will need to be authorised by the FCA. So that means they will need to abide by the current FCA rules and also take on this new authorised activity, as no regulation is currently in place. Access to the testing will be undertaken on the understanding that authorisation will not be guaranteed or automatic when the regime is put in place. It's expected once the programme moves from testing into a service using real data, authorisation will be mandated. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Helen. So we are planning to select 2 to 3 dashboard providers for the test phase, for the alpha test phase. Now, we are not using real data during alpha. Once you're connected, we will probably be working on dummy data. Working with us during alpha will allow you to provide input into the development of the key processes that will be needed to support the onboarding, the technical onboarding, and the management of the dashboard provider community. It will also sort of support the development of the service and design standards that will underpin the presentation of the pensions data on dashboards. This sort of we expect to be assisted or be one of the outcomes of the user research that we'll be undertaking during that time. Also help with the development of the regulations and how these regulations are applied by the Financial Conduct Authority. Helen mentioned those in the previous slide. Provide input into the testing of the architecture and gain insight into the development of the architecture. However, I would like to point out that we will also be sharing our findings and knowledge openly by a range of means, using our hub and potentially more webinars or any other means, depending on the type of information that we're looking to share. Can we go to the next slide, please, Caroline? Thank you. So in return, what do we ask of you? We would like you to be open and collaborative with us, with other dashboard providers in sharing existing knowledge and research, and be able to commit resource to this work, and if possible, be able to provide a willing client base who can participate and support the testing work. Also be able to share your dashboard prototype for testing and responding to the user research. And finally, it's important for me to point out that organizations that we select, we should not have previously had any authorization by the Financial Conduct Authority withdrawn. So that was the end of the information that we wanted to provide you. So I'd like to say thank you for joining us today. I hope you found this information useful. If there's anything else you would like, please drop that in the chat as well, and we can then pick that up either in writing or or in the webinar that we are going to conduct on the 21st. Broadly, the information on the next webinar will be very similar to what we went through today, unless there are any specific requests for further information, which we will include then. We'll modify the presentation. I haven't been going through the questions. Helen or James, if you have been, would you like to pick up?
Hi, Raman. Yes, I think
the questions,
Helen may
please.
be responding to Charlie's last question with her governance hat on. There we go. Thank you very much, Helen.
Yeah, I was just going to say you'll need FCA. You can get FCA authorization at any time. It's the additional regulated activity won't come in until the FCA's conduct of business rules have been issued.
And just to pick up your earlier question, Charlie, in terms of if you're not an alpha participant, I think that the number of alpha participants is strictly limited because obviously they are participating whilst we're going through the build phase. Following that, there will be opportunities for other participants to join as dashboard providers. As I said, it would just be a matter of scheduling to ensure that we're not overwhelmed at any one given point in time.
Thank you, James. That's really helpful. Also, Charlie, just wanted to point out that if an organization is selected to be an alpha participant, it doesn't guarantee them being a participant in beta as well. They would have to satisfy certain criteria to be a participant in beta, where we will be using live customer data to do the further development of the service. So I'm starting from the bottom. So Ian's question, at what point will real customers be seeing data? Is that in beta? The answer to that, Ian, is yes. But in early stages of beta, which we are calling beta, private beta 1, the service will be available to very limited select users. I think it'll only be users that we invite specifically to participate in the test phase. Yes, to Charlie's question, yes, you could be accepted for beta, having not participated in alpha. I'm doing this the wrong way around, but we are approaching 2:30. So Caroline, could you sort of manage the time for the 1 minute silence, please?
Yes. Yeah, should we just take a moment now to observe the minute silence? Thank you.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Jet, can you say that I'll email some stuff through a bit later with regard to.
Thanks all. Let's spend 1 minute.
Sure that
I'll pass you back, Raman.
Thanks. I'll quickly pick up on just on Charlie's question. Yeah, the alpha and beta are just purely to denote the program phases. So you could potentially be joining at any point during private or even public beta. as a dashboard provider, it wouldn't make a difference. Raman, I don't know if you want to go into detail on Ian McIntyre's question in terms of what customers see on screen and layout with regards to the design standards.
Ian, so what we will be doing in Alpha, though that's one of the things that we will be doing. So we will not be using real data. So the focus is on dummy data and what customers see on screen and how does the layout, how do users, customers respond to the layout and the information that they see. So it'll be more around the design. So any information that we gain during Alpha will be used to feed into any design guidance and the design standards that the program will be developing. We will continue to develop the design as customers see their real data when they are in beta, in the controlled testing as well. Because from experience, I know that a customer's response to dummy data is different to a customer's response to when they see their own data. So we may gain a bit more or a lot more insight as we go into into beta. So for me, it is an ongoing process of ensuring that the design and what customers see on screen enables them to understand their pension position. Any other questions? So Charlie, your question, yes, so James has answered that. That's correct. So if there are no further questions, okay. Are there any restrictions on what other value-added services may be offered by a provider over and above the facilities already described? Helen, do you want to take that?
Technically, what you choose to provide currently is no, apart from within the design standards where maybe restrictions on advertising, etc. However, you should bear in mind that the data that is viewed by the human. Currently, we wouldn't anticipate it being stored at the dashboard. So I hope that answers your question, Wick.
Great, thank you. So Caroline, doesn't look like we have any further questions, but if people do have further questions, please feel free to email us on info.pdp@maps.org.uk. And the next webinar is on 21st. If there are other people that you know who may be interested in attending, please let them know and ask them to register. How can they register, Caroline, for the webinars?
There's a link on our website, but I will follow up with all participants and share a recording for this webinar, as well as a link to register for the webinar on Thursday.
Thank you very much. So all that's left now is for me to say thank you to all of you for attending. We hope you found it useful. If you do have any further questions, if you feel there are areas that we could cover, please do let us know. Do get back to us and hope to hear from you all. And yes, I think the answer to the slides is a yes, Caroline.
Yes, I'll share those to everybody that's participated so they can view those along with the recording of the webinar. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Bye.